I was standing on the porch of the Rosewood Collection, just watching the snow fall. 9 inches had settled overnight, and the silence here in rural Connecticut was the only thing I'd ever truly owned. It was the kind of quiet that healed the noise that had been chasing me for years. Caspian, my old Rhodesian ridgeback, was asleep at my feet, his gray muzzle resting on the weathered planks, twitching faintly with a dream of chasing squirrels, I hoped. Then the quiet was brutally shattered. 2 black SUVs and a massive U-Haul truck roared up the narrow, unpaved lane, their tires spitting slush and gravel before they stopped hard at my wrought iron gate. Engines idled, thick exhaust clouding the frozen air. My heart immediately slammed against my ribs. I knew that sound. I knew that conqueror's approach. I was already sprinting toward the gate before the first door opened. Out stepped Alistair Thorne, my father, adjusting his expensive wool coat like he was arriving at a holiday ski resort. That familiar, expansive smile of a man about to take something that wasn't his. That was the same look he'd worn 6 years ago when he'd convinced me to liquidate my 401k to save his utterly defunct ethical investment firm. Then Merrick, my brother, jumped down from the truck's cab. He didn't even glance at me as he started barking orders at the 3 men climbing out of the U-Haul. Careful with those server racks, don't scratch the casings. He was already directing them to start unloading industrial-looking equipment right there on the curb, blocking the lane. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out choked. Caspian had scrambled to his feet, pressing himself against my legs, a low, guttural whine building in his chest. Alistair's smile widened, cold and predatory. "Ilara, sweetheart, we're home." Home. It was a vicious word. 2 years. 2 years of 80-hour weeks at the archives, living on black coffee and the anxious energy of always looking over my shoulder. 2 years of saving every cent of the commission I'd earned from authenticating that rare Medici manuscript so I could buy this property, register it anonymously under the New England Antiquarian Trust, NEAT, and finally disappear from them. I thought I'd been foolproof. New phone, private accounts, mail routed through a P.O. box 4 towns away. But I'd made one arrogant, sentimental mistake. 3 months ago, I'd posted a close-up, anonymous photo of the library's unique hand-tooled Leth bindings on a rare book forum. The local historical society had recognized the distinct 18th century tooling pattern, gushed about the restoration of the Rosewood Collection, and publicly reposted the full address. My mother, who keeps Google alerts set up for my name, my old addresses, and any obscure terms I used in my college papers, found me within hours. "How did you know I was here?" I managed, gripping the cold iron bars of the gate. Alistair pointed casually to the tree line across the road. "I parked right over there for 14 hours yesterday. Watched you walk the dog at 7:30, saw your Volvo in the drive, saw you leave for groceries, and come back alone." He tilted his head, calculating. "I know you're all alone in this big house, Ilara. That's no way to live." The calculation in his voice was sickening. This wasn't a family reunion, it was a hostile takeover. "You need to leave," I said, forcing steel into my voice. "This is private property. You are not welcome." Merrick finally looked at me, his expression a familiar mix of boredom and contempt. "Ilara, don't be dramatic. We're family." He gestured at the hardware being stacked on my curb. "And I've got a business to run. The lease is already signed." "What lease?" Alistair pulled a folded document from his wool coat. "Merrick is renting your basement. Very reasonable terms. $1 a month for 5 years. You signed it last month, remember?" The world tilted. "I never signed anything." "Your signature's right there, sweetheart." I stood frozen. Every instinct, honed over 20 years of dealing with their scams, screamed that this was a trap. Alistair's smile vanished. He pulled out his phone. 20 minutes later, a locksmith's van pulled up. Alistair intercepted him, transforming instantly, shoulders slumping, voice dropping into a concerned paternal murmur. He showed the locksmith his ID, pointed to the shared last name. "I'm her father," he said loud enough for me to hear. "My daughter's having a mental health crisis. She's locked herself inside and won't let anyone in. We're worried sick." The locksmith glanced at me, then back at Alistair's worried performance. "I understand, sir." He approached the gate, drill in hand. "Miss, I'm going to need you to step back." "Don't you dare," I screamed. "He's lying." But the drill was already screaming, metal on metal, and the sound triggered something horrifying in Caspian. He was a rescue, terrified of loud machinery. The old dog started barking, deep, terrified barks that tore at his throat. Merrick's patience snapped. He strode along the fence line where the decorative iron dipped lower behind some dense rhododendrons, hauled himself up and over with a grunt, and dropped into my yard. Caspian lunged, trying to protect me, but his arthritic hips trembled. He hesitated for a split second, fear warring with loyalty. It was all the time Merrick needed. His boot came up fast and brutal, catching the old dog square in the hip. Caspian yelped, a high, agonized sound I'd never heard him make, and scrambled away from Merrick's reaching hands. "Caspian, no!" I screamed. But Merrick had already reached the gate's interior latch. He twisted it, and the gate swung wide. Caspian, terrified and hurting, bolted straight through the opening and out onto the road. The icy, busy road where cars flew around the blind curve at 40 miles an hour. I didn't think. I ran. Behind me, I heard the SUV engines rev, heard the U-Haul's hydraulic lift whining, heard Merrick laughing as he waved the convoy through. By the time I reached Caspian, shaking violently in a snowbank, eyes wild with panic, my family's vehicles were already rolling through my gate and up my drive. The occupation had begun. I stumbled back through the gate 15 minutes later, Caspian trembling heavily in my arms. He was too heavy for me to carry far, but I couldn't risk putting him down, not with the panic still raging in his eyes. His hip joint clicked painfully with each breath, and I felt the wetness of his tears soaking into the collar of my coat. Alistair was blocking the massive oak front door, the fraudulent lease agreement held up like a shield. "I'm glad you're back, Ilara. Let's talk about this reasonably." He gestured toward the open doorway behind him, where I could already hear heavy server equipment scraping across the original hardwood floors. "Merrick is just setting up his operation in the basement. Very quiet, very professional. You won't even know we're here." I pushed past him, Caspian still clutched to my chest. My beautiful restored oak door stood wide open, letting in a blast of Arctic air. Snow was already melting into dark puddles on the 19th century floors. "Get out," I said, my voice quiet but sharp with adrenaline. "All of you, get out of my library." Alistair's expression became pitying. "Ilara, I know you're upset, but look at this." He smoothed the document against the doorframe. "This is a legal agreement. Merrick rents the basement for $1 a month, 5-year term. Your signature, your witness, everything properly notarized." I finally lowered Caspian to the floor, my arms burning. The old dog immediately limped to the nearest corner and collapsed, whimpering softly. I looked at the document. The signature looked startlingly like mine. The notary stamp was crisp and official. The date was from 6 weeks ago, a Tuesday, when I'd been at a massive conservation conference in Vienna. "This is forged," I stated flatly. "I was in Austria that day. I never signed this." "That's not what the document says." "I don't care what it says. It's fake, and you know it." Merrick emerged from the basement doorway, wiping dust from his hands onto his expensive jeans. He was holding a voltage meter. "What are you doing down there?" I demanded. "Just checking the load capacity," Merrick said dismissively. "Old houses have terrible wiring. I need to make sure the circuits can handle the rigs." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Connecticut State Police? I need an officer at the Rosewood Collection immediately. I have intruders who broke into my home and assaulted my dog. They're refusing to leave." Alistair didn't even flinch. He just folded the lease back into his coat and smiled. The wait for the police felt eternal, but it was barely 30 minutes before Chief Sergeant Reynolds' cruiser crunched up the gravel drive. Reynolds was a tall, weary man who'd spent 2 decades mediating small-town disputes. I met him at the broken door, still holding Caspian's collar. "Thank you for coming, Sergeant. These people broke into my home." "Now, hold on." Reynolds raised a hand, measured and cautious. He looked past me at Alistair, who stood centered in the foyer playing the patriarch. "Sir, are you a resident here?" Alistair produced the lease with a theatrical flourish. My son, Merrick, rents the basement. This is a legal tenancy agreement, signed by the property owner, my daughter, Alara Thorne. Reynolds took the document, studied the signature and the notary seal. Miss Thorne, is this your signature? No, it's forged. I've never rented anything to anyone. This is my home and they have no right to be here. The sergeant's expression shifted, not unsympathetic, but utterly resigned. Ma'am, I understand your position, but this appears to be a civil matter. Your brother has a lease agreement that appears valid on its face. I'm not a handwriting expert, and I'm not a judge. If this signature is fraudulent, you'll need to prove that in civil court and go through the formal eviction process. Eviction? Sergeant, they kicked my dog. They broke in with a drill. Did anyone witness the alleged assault on the animal? I opened my mouth, then closed it. I'd been out on the road when Merrick kicked him. The locksmith had been focused on the gate. It was Merrick's word against mine. The law, I realized with a sickening twist, was being weaponized against me by technicality. Fine, I said quietly. Sergeant, thank you for your time. As Reynolds turned to leave, clearly relieved to escape the domestic minefield, I pulled out my phone. I scrolled past Alistair and Merrick's contact entries, past the burned bridges, and found the number Julian Thorne had given me when he'd helped me set up the neat. I put Julian on speakerphone so Alistair could hear every word. Julian's lawyerly voice filled the foyer, precise and cutting. Mr. Thorne, Julian said, his tone cordial but edged with steel, I'm sure you're aware that Alara Thorne is not the legal owner of the Rosewood collection. The property is held in trust by the New England Antiquarian Trust, a registered nonprofit entity. Alara is the trustee, not the owner. Alistair froze mid-gesture. Julian continued, which means that lease agreement, the one with Ilara's signature, is invalid, regardless of its authenticity. Ilara cannot rent property she doesn't personally own. Any rental agreement would need to be executed by the trust itself, with proper board approval. Furthermore, Julian added, his voice dropping slightly, if that signature is fraudulent, as Ilara claims, then you've used fraudulent documents to gain access to trust property. That's not a civil matter, Mr. Thorne. That's criminal trespassing on a nonprofit entity, a felony in this state. Merrick's confident grin vanished. Dad, what is he talking about? Alistair held up a silencing hand. This is a family misunderstanding. I'm not confused, I said softly. Chief Sergeant Reynolds? Reynolds, who had paused on the porch, stepped back inside, his expression hardening as he processed the lawyer's words. Trespassing on a nonprofit trust was a different beast entirely. Mr. Thorne, Reynolds said, if you cannot prove you have an agreement with the trust, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises until this is verified by a court. Alistair's mask finally slipped, revealing the fury underneath. You're making a mistake, Ilara, he hissed. Family is supposed to help each other. Tell your lawyer that, I replied. They left, defeated for now, loaded back into their vehicles, heading for the nearest Motel 6. Merrick paused at the broken doorway, giving me one last chilling look. Enjoy the darkness, little sister. I didn't understand what he meant until I closed the door and locked it. Silence returned, but something was terribly wrong. The hum of the refrigerator was gone, the thermostat display was blank. I ran to the basement. The main breaker panel was open. Merrick hadn't just checked the capacity, he had severed the main feed wires to the furnace and the kitchen circuits. He had sabotaged the heating system before Reynolds had even walked in the door. I wrapped myself in 3 blankets and sat on the floor next to Caspian, both of us shivering as the temperature outside dropped to -3 degrees. I deleted Mom and Dad from my emergency contacts and saved Julian Thorne to my favorites. The battle had just begun. The Rosewood collection felt like a mausoleum. I woke on the second day, wrapped in 3 heavy blankets on the living room sofa,
my breath clouding in the frigid air. Caspian was pressed against my legs, shivering, despite the old velvet quilt I'd tucked around him. The antique steam radiators stood silent and cold, elaborate iron structures, now merely decorative coffins for the heating system Merrick had murdered. I'd called 4 emergency electricians the night before. 3 hadn't answered. The 4th had listened to my frantic description of the intentional wiring sabotage and flatly said he couldn't come until after the new year, a week away.
Everyone was booked, or gone, or unwilling to drive out to this secluded part of Connecticut in the heavy snow. So I sat in the paralyzing cold and did the only thing I could. I documented everything. Photos of the electrical panel, wires hanging like severed arteries, close-ups of Caspian's hip, the bruising now a deep purple beneath his fur, screenshots of the property deed showing the NEAT as the legal owner, and the forged lease agreement photographed from every angle. I was uploading the files to Julian's secure cloud drive when my phone rang. "Miss Thorne?" A woman's voice, professional and distinctly irritated. "This is Pamela from Rural Electric Co. I'm calling about the account transfer request we received this morning." My fingers froze on the keyboard. "I didn't request any transfer. Our records show a request submitted at 8:47 a.m. to transfer the account for the Rosewood collection from your name to Merrick Thorne. The caller provided your social security number for verification." Ice flooded my veins. Merrick didn't have my social security number, but Mom did. Mom had co-signed my grad school loans. Mom had my SSN memorized and written in her precise handwriting in the family records she guarded. And she'd just handed it to Merrick to commit utility fraud, to manufacture proof of residency, to build his fraudulent claim to my home. "That wasn't me. Someone's committing identity fraud." A pause. "I see. Can you verify your social security number now?" I did, and heard Pamela's typing accelerate. "All right, Miss Thorne, I'm flagging this as fraudulent and reversing the transfer. You'll want to file a police report immediately. Whoever called us this morning had access to your private information." After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone. The betrayal, a bitter taste in my mouth. I called Julian Thorne immediately. "Ilara?" He answered, instantly alert. "I've been expecting your call. I saw the social media posts." "What posts?" He sighed. "Your mother has been very active on Facebook since yesterday evening. According to her narrative, you've kicked your elderly father out into the freezing cold, refused to let your brother run his legitimate digital business, and are having some sort of severe emotional breakdown. She's rallying quite a bit of sympathy." I pulled up Facebook on my laptop. My mother's page was public. "Heartbroken tonight," her latest post read. "My daughter has locked us out of the family home in this freezing weather. We've tried everything, but she is not well. Sometimes mental illness makes people turn against those who love them most." 300 reactions. 87 comments, mostly expressing concern and pity for my struggling family. I closed the laptop before I could read the comments. "Ilara?" Julian's voice pulled me back. "They're lying about everything." "I know, which is why we're hitting them with everything we have." His tone shifted to razor-sharp strategy. "The utility fraud gives us ammunition. I want you to file a police report immediately for identity theft. Then we're filing a complaint with the FTC. This isn't just about your house anymore. Merrick just committed a federal crime." "Will it be enough?" "It's a start. But Ilara, I need you to understand they're fighting dirty because they are desperate. Merrick was evicted from his last place 6 months ago. He owes over $8,000 in back rent. Your parents' credit is destroyed. They're out of options, out of money, and they see your library as their last chance. They need this more than you do. So what do? You become a fortress. Every move they make, we counter. Every lie they tell, we document. And most importantly, we make them radioactive." He paused. "Have you considered going public?" "Public how?" "The Connecticut Zoning Board meets virtually tomorrow morning. I'm filing an emergency complaint tonight.
Merrick wants to run a commercial crypto mining operation, an industrial facility, in a Class A historic preservation district. That's a direct violation of preservation codes. I felt a surge of cold fury mixed with relief. They'll shut him down, they'll blacklist him, and more importantly, it'll be a matter of public record. Your mother wants to play the sympathy game. Let's show the town exactly what kind of business Merrick is really running. I hung up and immediately filed the formal identity theft report with the state police and the FTC complaint. Each form I filled out, each case number I received, felt like laying bricks in a wall between us. I was heating canned soup on a small camping stove, my only means of cooking without power, when my phone buzzed with a text from an old college friend who lived nearby. Ilara.
Heads up. Saw your brother and dad at Sterling Hardware this afternoon. They were buying heavy-duty bolt cutters and asking about gate locks. Looked intense. You okay? My hand tightened on the phone. Bolt cutters. They were planning another breach. But this time, they wouldn't have the excuse of a mental health emergency or a fake lease to hide behind. This time, it would be pure, undeniable criminal trespass. I forwarded the text to Julian, then walked through the dark, freezing house to check every lock, every window. Caspian limped after me, whining softly, sensing my fear. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, running my hand over his head. "We're going to be okay." But I wasn't sure I believed it. Outside, the wind howled through the bare trees, and my family was buying tools to break in. The Connecticut Zoning Board met via video conference the next morning at 10 a.m. I sat in my freezing library, laptop balanced on my knees, watching the gallery of stern faces populate the screen. Julian appeared in his own window, dressed in a suit despite working from home. Agenda item 7. The board chair, a severe woman named Miss Henderson, announced, "Emergency preservation complaint regarding the Rosewood collection filed by Julian Thorne on behalf of the NEAT." Julian unmuted himself. "Thank you, Madam Chair. We've received credible intelligence that Mr. Merrick Thorne intends to operate a commercial cryptocurrency mining facility from the basement of this building, a Class A historic property in a residential preservation district. This operation would involve industrial electrical demands, excessive heat generation, and 24-hour mechanical noise, all of which violate Section 12.3 of the town's Historic Preservation Code." One of the board members leaned forward. "Has Mr. Thorne applied for commercial permits?" "No, sir. He attempted to illegally access the property using fraudulent lease documentation and has made no effort to comply with any commercial zoning requirements." Miss Henderson's expression hardened. "Does Mr. Thorne wish to address this complaint?" Silence. Merrick and Alistair weren't on the call. They'd likely never even known about the meeting. "Very well. The board will issue an emergency cease and desist order, effective immediately. Any attempt by Mr. Merrick Thorne to operate a commercial enterprise from the Rosewood collection will result in daily fines of $1,000 and potential criminal charges for zoning violations." She looked directly into the camera. "Mr. Thorne, please forward this order to the state police for enforcement." "Thank you, Madam Chair." The fortress wall had just grown impossibly higher. By evening, Merrick knew. I discovered this when my phone exploded with notifications, all from the private Instagram messages Willow, Merrick's social media-obsessed girlfriend, was broadcasting. "Felix," one read. She still used his old alias. "The town just blacklisted me. Your sister destroyed everything." Another, "Felix, we can't stay at the motel anymore. My card got declined. We're out of money." A final, desperate one. "This is your fault. You had to go psycho with the lawyers." I screenshotted every message and sent them to Julian. Then I went on offense. There was a local blogger in town, a retired journalist named Linda Chen, who ran a widely read community news site. I sent her an email. "Miss Chen, my name is Ilara Thorne, and I'm the trustee of the NEAT, which owns the Rosewood collection. I wanted to make you aware of a situation that involves property fraud and zoning violations." I attached the zoning board decision, Merrick's eviction records, public record, and the police report I'd filed for identity theft. My family has attempted to seize control of a historic property using forged documents and fraudulent utility transfers. They've been blocked by the authorities, but the community should be aware of the situation.
I hit send. Linda replied within 2 hours. Alara, I'd like to speak with you on the record tomorrow morning. But tomorrow was too far away.
That night, bundled with Caspian, I heard a vehicle pull up outside, slowly, headlights off. I crept to the window and peered through the curtains. Alistair's SUV, idling at the end of the driveway, watching the house. Reconnaissance. Planning. I immediately called Dr. Reese Harding, the architectural historian from the local society who'd been helping me with the library's restoration proposals. He was quiet, competent, and trustworthy. Reese, I need a strange favor. Tonight. Try me. His voice was calm and steady. I explained the situation. Not all the legal drama, but enough. I think they're going to try to break in again, soon, and I need to make sure this gate holds. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived with his truck bed full of tools. Together, we discreetly reinforced the gate, adding internal braces invisible from the street and installing a heavy-duty, commercial-grade padlock that couldn't be drilled easily. Ilara, Reese said as we worked, his breath fogging in the cold. You know you don't have to face this alone. I looked at him, the steady hands, the careful attention to detail. Thank you, I said quietly. I mean it, if you need anything. Actually, I interrupted, an idea crystallizing. New Year's Eve, are you free? By the next morning, Linda Chen's article was live. Historic library dispute turns ugly. Family accused of felony fraud and zoning violations. The town's sympathy for my homeless family evaporated as the facts, the eviction, the forgery, the crypto mining attempt, were laid out in verifiable detail. My phone buzzed with an anonymous text. You're going to regret this. We're family. You don't destroy family. I forwarded it to Julian and Chief Reynolds. Then I went through my contact list again, making calls, quiet calls, to Miss Henderson, the zoning chair, to the president of the Historical Society, to carefully selected members of the town's small but influential preservation circle. I'm hosting a very small private New Year's Eve gathering, I told each of them. Nothing fancy, just a few close friends at the Rosewood Collection. I'd be honored if you could join me. Every single one accepted. I gave them specific instructions. Park at the rear entrance, come in through the garden gate, keep it quiet. The front of the house needs to look abandoned. Reese helped me prep the interior, a small catering setup, enough Prosecco for 30 people, a student string quartet. The front rooms remain dark, heavy velvet curtains drawn tight. On New Year's Eve morning, Willow posted one final tearful video from the Motel 6 parking lot, Merrick visible in the background loading suitcases. We're officially homeless, she wept to the camera. Merrick's evil sister has destroyed us. But we're not giving up. Tonight, we're going to reclaim what's rightfully ours. Justice will be served. I watched the video, memorizing the timestamp. Then I called Chief Reynolds. Chief, I said, I have reason to believe my family will attempt to break into the Rosewood Collection tonight. I have video evidence of them threatening to reclaim the property and a witness who saw them purchase burglary tools. I'm formally requesting police presence. There was a long pause. Ms. Thorne, Reynolds finally said, I will be attending your New Year's gathering as a guest, but I'll have my badge with me. If anything happens, we'll handle it appropriately. Thank you, Chief. The trap was set. New Year's Eve arrived with brittle cold. I'd finally managed to bribe an electrician to fix the sabotage. It cost me $4,000, and the library was warm again. Guests arrived through the back entrance. The mayor, Miss Henderson, the Historical Society president, Chief Reynolds in a suit with his badge clipped to his belt. We were all mingling in the great room, which looked like a Gilded Age salon, when I positioned myself near the curtained front windows at 11:30 p.m. Then I saw them. 2 vehicles,
headlights off, rolling slowly up the lane. They parked at the tree line. 3 figures emerged: Alistair, Merrick, and Willow, phone held high, live streaming. "They're here," I murmured. Reese appeared on my shoulder, and Chief Reynolds casually drifted closer. "It's 11:45 on New Year's Eve," Willow announced breathlessly to the camera. "Merrick's evil sister has been illegally keeping him from his property, but that ends tonight. Watch this, guys. This is what standing up for yourself looks like." They reached the reinforced gate. Merrick examined the lock and positioned the bolt cutters. The blades bit into the heavy metal with a sharp, sickening crack that echoed across the yard. The lock fell away. Merrick kicked the gate open and strode up the walkway towards my front door, Alistair and Merrick trailing behind.
"Ilara," Merrick's voice boomed across the property. "I know you're in there. This is my house now. You can't hide anymore." He reached the massive oak door and kicked it. Once, twice. On the third kick, the lock mechanism gave way and the door crashed inward. Merrick stormed into the entryway, bolt cutters still gripped in one hand, his face red with rage and triumph. "Ilara, there's nowhere to—" He froze. The entryway was flooded with warm golden light from the great room, and standing there, champagne glasses in hand, were 30 of rural Connecticut's most influential citizens. The room fell into a terrifying silence. Guests lowered their glasses, watching the scene unfold. Merrick stood there, panting, the bolt cutters looking obscene in the elegant room. He stared at Miss Henderson, at the mayor, at the town's wealthiest donors, and at Chief Reynolds, whose hand was now resting openly on his badge. The only sound was Willow's phone, still recording, still live streaming this entire catastrophic miscalculation. "Merrick Thorne," Chief Reynolds said, setting down his glass and stepping forward. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You're under arrest." I have a lease." "You have forged documents. You have a zoning board cease and desist order. And now you have just committed breaking and entering with burglary tools in front of 36 witnesses?" Reynolds pulled his handcuffs from his belt. "This is no longer a civil matter." Alistair tried to step forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Officer, please, this is just a family misunderstanding." "Mr. Thorne," Reynolds interrupted, "I have arrest warrants for you as well. Forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft. Step over here, please." I stood on the landing of the grand staircase, looking down at them. Merrick's eyes found mine, and for a moment I saw genuine desperation. "Ilara, please, we're family. You can't do this." "Mr. Merrick Thorne," I said quietly, my voice carrying in the sudden silence, "please direct all future communications to my attorney." 2 more squad cars pulled up outside, lights flashing red and blue across the snow. Merrick was handcuffed first. Breaking and entering, criminal trespass, possession of burglary tools, animal cruelty for the incident with Caspian, and identity theft. Alistair was next. Forgery, conspiracy, fraud. Willow stood in the doorway, still holding her phone, pale as she realized what she'd just broadcasted live. She looked at Merrick, at the handcuffs. "I didn't know." "Merrick, you said this was legal." "Willow, don't—" Merrick started, but she was already backing away. "We're done," she said flatly. "I'm not going down with you." She turned and ran for the gate, her phone still broadcasting her escape. Chief Reynolds escorted Merrick and Alistair outside, reading them their rights. I watched from the doorway as they were loaded into separate squad cars. The blue lights painted the snow. Then the cars pulled away, tires crunching on ice, and they were gone. The mayor cleared his throat behind me. "Ilara, I'm so sorry you had to go through this." I turned back to the gathered crowd. "Thank you all for being here. I know this wasn't the New Year's celebration you expected." "On the contrary," the Historical Society president said, raising her glass, "I think we just witnessed justice. To Ilara Thorne and to the Rosewood Collection."
The others raised their glasses to Ilara. Reese was at my side, his hand gentle on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I looked around at the broken door, the snow melting on my floors, the bolt cutters lying discarded in the entryway. Then I looked at the people filling my home, not invaders, but guests I'd chosen. "Yes," I said, and knew I meant it. "I'm okay." Outside, midnight struck. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks began to bloom against the winter sky. The siege was over. 5 months later, spring came to Connecticut. The heavy snow was a memory, replaced by warm breezes carrying the scent of lilacs through open windows. I sat in the Rosewood Collection's quiet garden, reviewing restoration proposals for the carriage house. The work didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like a labor of love.
Caspian lay in a patch of sunlight near my feet, his muzzle resting on Reese's boots. The old dog's hip had healed well, and the fear was gone. He slept peacefully while Reese worked, carefully brushing dirt from a fragment of 18th century pottery he'd found near the old wall. "Looks like Wedgwood," Reese murmured, holding the piece up to the light. "Your Victorian-era residents had good taste." "They also buried their trash in the flower beds," I pointed out. He grinned. "Archaeologists call that enriching the historical record." I smiled, watching him. Over the winter, Reese had become a constant presence, helping me repair the front door, bringing coffee when I had to give depositions, sitting with Caspian. Somewhere along the way, colleague had shifted to friend, and then to something that made me feel profoundly safe. The brass plaque on the front gate caught the sunlight, its engraving sharp and clear. "Property of the New England Antiquarian Trust. By invitation only." I'd had it installed in February, after the criminal trials concluded. Merrick had pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence, 18 months in minimum security, plus restitution and probation. Alistair got 2 years for forgery and conspiracy. Mom had never been charged. She claimed ignorance, but she'd stopped calling. The silence from her was more telling than any conviction. "Alara?" Reese's voice pulled me back. He was watching me with that careful expression he got when I drifted into thought. "You okay?" "Yeah." I closed my laptop. I was just thinking about how different things are now. "Good different?" I looked around the garden, at Caspian sleeping peacefully, at the library standing solid and warm behind us, at Reese, with dirt under his fingernails and his eyes crinkling with a quiet smile. Very good different. His hand found mine across the table, fingers intertwining. I didn't tense anymore when I heard a car on the road. The gate was locked, the alarms were set, and I'd learned the difference between being isolated and being protected. I'd learned how to build boundaries without apology, and that family was defined by who showed up when you needed them, not by blood. I squeezed Reese's hand and he squeezed back, his focus already returning to his work. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders, and for the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I felt a deep, settled peace. The kind of peace that came from knowing I'd fought for something and won. The kind that came from finally understanding that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The Rosewood Collection was no longer a fortress under siege. It was my home. And this time, the gate that protected it was there not to hide fear, but to shelter the happiness I'd built inside.